So our next presentation is by Professor Melissa again. She now would like to present her work on the teaching the women peace and security agenda in law school, lessons from Qatar. If we can please play that.
I am a clinical assistant professor at Qatar University College of Law in Doha, Qatar. Today I'm going to talk to you about teaching women peace and security agenda in your law school and lessons learned from me teaching it here in Doha in the Middle East. So the first thing is, what is women peace and security? Now, women peace and security the agenda. It stands for a global set of resolutions, statements, action plans, acts, strategies, and initiatives that contend that women's equality is a security and peace issue, and that women's full involvement at all levels of peace and security decision-making is essential to global stability and prosperity. Research for women, peace, and security demonstrates the importance of female participation and leadership in the prevention and resolution of conflicts, in peace negotiations, peace building, peacekeeping, humanitarian response, and post-conflict reconstruction. Some examples of women, peace, and security research are that they've found inclusion of local women in peace negotiations significantly increases the durability and sustainability of peace. Mary Caprioli has found a link between gender inequity within a sovereign and that sovereign's use of military force in intrastate conflict. And a direct correlation has been found between women's control of household spending with human security. Women, peace, and security is built on 4 pillars: participation, conflict prevention, protection, and relief and recovery. Participation pillar urges UN member states to increase participation of women at all levels of decision-making, including in national, regional, and international institutions. Conflict prevention urges member states to improve strategies for the prevention of violence against women, to incorporate gender perspectives and women's participation in conflict prevention and disarmament strategies, to strengthen women's rights under international law, and to support peace by encouraging equality, human rights, and human security for all. The protection pillar urges UN member states to adopt specific protections for women and girls from sexual and gender-based violence, including in conflict and post-conflict settings. And the relief and recovery pillar urges UN member states to provide, to think about unique gender needs, such during conflict relief and recovery measures. So examples are providing health services and trauma counseling to survivors of rape and assault, or considering the unique needs of girls and women when designing refugee camps. Now, women, peace, and security is connected to the Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs, that you've probably heard of, which were adopted by all UN member states in 2015 as part of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Women, Peace, and Security bridges SDG 5, which relates to gender equality, and SDG 16, which relates to peace, justice, and strong institutions. The seeds for women, peace, and security were sown during September 1995 at the 4th World Conference on Women in Beijing, China, during which then First Lady of the United States, Hillary Rodham Clinton, famously remarked that it is no longer acceptable to discuss women's rights as separate from human rights. Human rights are women's rights, and women's rights are human rights. 5 years after Beijing, the United Nations Security Council unanimously passed United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325, which was the first Women, Peace, and Security resolution. And since then, 9 additional Security Council resolutions have been adopted. So there are 10 total. And for some reason, my slide is not showing them all, so I apologize for that. Now, I argue that women, peace, and security is relevant and should be taught in MENA Law School's and MENA Law curriculum for a variety of reasons. The first being is that 18 MENA states are UN member states. So as UN member states, they're subject to the requirements of United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325 already, and as well as the other 9 Security Council resolutions dealing with women, peace, and security. But also, all MENA states, except for Iran, have ratified the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW. So that's another reason of why. Unfortunately, why women's peace and security needs to be taught is because despite being UN member states, despite having ratified CEDAW, women in the MENA region still only account for 23% of the labor force. Laws in almost all the states continue to discriminate against women freely participating in the economy, and deep-rooted cultural attitudes continue to discourage women from working in many women peace security fields, including law, the judiciary, politics, security, and international diplomacy. So there has been an overwhelming amount of research in modern times emphasizing the importance of diversity, and particularly gender diversity in law and business. However, unfortunately, in its most recent report, the World Bank, in its most recent report, Women, Business, and the Law, the World Bank analyzed how laws affect women in their professional lives in the MENA region, and looked at data pertaining to 8 indicators of women's legal status. And it found that economies in the MENA region had the lowest average global score for legal gender gap, and the lowest increase in the average score during the past 10 years. The World Bank even went so far as to report that if the MENA region's current pace and legal gender gap reform is so slow in comparison to the other regions, that it will only continue to increase if nothing changes. What's disheartening about this is so much other research has found what MENA women have to contribute to the economy and to society, and unfortunately they're not being offered that chance. One McKinsey report said that female leaders in the Gulf Cooperation Councils countries exhibit 4 leadership behaviors correlated with organizational effectiveness more often than their male counterparts. Those are inspiration, people development, official communication, and participative decision making. Yet they're not being allowed, they're not being able to pursue leadership roles. So much of the reason are restrictive laws, practices, and social norms. And the way to get around that, I have found, are law students and legal professionals. As Cynthia Fuchs Epstein, a famous sociologist, pioneered the study of women in the law in the United States, as she argued more than 30 years ago. When women enter the legal world, they call for the reinterpretation of laws and their practice. And I 100% believe that the same is possible in the MENA region, so long as we teach the law students how to critically think and possibly engage in legal activism that would increase female participation in the workforce and encourage them to participate in women, peace, and security. So how I've been teaching this in Qatar, I have been teaching women, peace, and security concepts in Qatar for at least a year and a half. But it took 3 semesters to be able to build up to a full class that I was able to teach about women, peace, and security. And even then, actually, I still had to incorporate inequalities and advocacy skills in it. A standalone course on women, peace, and security as a subject in itself was not able to be added. But again, adding it within the pre-existing classes, adding these concepts is a credible start and a great idea. So for me, I have taught this to undergraduate law students at Qatar University College of Law, and I have taught women, peace, and security to master's students at Hamad bin Khalifa University College of Islamic Studies. And what I've been surprised about each time, and for master students and the undergrads both, is that despite many of them being very aware of current events and Qatar playing a bigger role in world business and politics and even peace negotiations, none of my students throughout any of the semesters had ever heard of women, peace, and security before. And many of them had not even heard of SDG 5 or SDG 16. And also a significant amount of them were downright scared of the word feminist or feminism, and very reluctant to hear anything that had to do with it. So I decided that I would teach, I would not make this a feminist, I would not say I'm teaching feminist international relations or feminist foreign policy when I'm teaching women, peace, and security. I decided to call it ethics and integrity, and I was integrating an advocacy into my classes. So I relied heavily on the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crimes, Doha Declaration, Education for Justice Initiative. This is a website, a program that is online under Education for Justice, and it is free materials developed by the UNODC and in conjunction with UNESCO and consultants. You can incorporate as much or as little as you want. They have exercise, they have readings, and I used a lot of those exercises when working with my students, both undergrad and masters. A lot of what I would do, not just teaching theoretical and having them read different policy pieces, I would have them read Valerie Hudson, I would have them read Mary Caprioli, but I would also have everything relate to Qatar. So I would try and have them look at the website where it was showing how many states had developed national action plans for women, peace, and security. And I'd let them try and look at the flag. And when they couldn't find Qatar's flag, then we would have a conversation about it. I would highlight to them Qatar's UN member state obligations. I would let them read the CEDAW reports, and I would try and get them to, I would incorporate those with the ethics and integrity lectures. I would highlight different community leaders in Qatar who are women, peace, and security, who are advancing women, peace, and security and gender equality in their own way, and let my students have role models that they knew and could recognize. I would show them what some of their role models were doing at a greater an international level to advance in international affairs. And then I would always tie it again to policy pieces, and I teach in law schools, but for my master's students, I wasn't at a law school, but I was still bringing it back to policy. So I would have them look at the various provisions of the Constitution. I would have them look at Qatar's responses to CEDAW when they had to follow up on the treaty. And I would have them read various speeches by the Emir, His Highness the Emir, official government reports, official government policy pieces. I would show them official documents like the Qatar National Vision and how that relates to women, peace, and security. And we would also be looking at what Qatar was doing abroad and at the international level to promote it. Again, we'd also talk about, it was a fabulous, we were able to incorporate the Afghan peace negotiations here. Those took place here in Doha, and I would have them look at the newspapers and show me how there's an absence of women at the peace table, and what does that have to do with women, peace, and security, and how could they help encourage Afghani women to, or help encourage women to be involved in this. But again, teaching women peace and security theoretically is very different. I mean, I wanted the students to be able to go beyond theory. Teaching women empowerment in theory is very different. It doesn't mean anything if I have students who don't feel like they're able to speak or publicly. So I had them do as many practical student public speaking opportunities as they could. I would have them engage in community events where they would teach women, peace, and security to local elementary students. I would have them do street law experiences where they would work with local high schoolers and local middle schoolers, and I would go with them when needed, or I would also go and teach women, peace, and security. Here I am with Taimun, the Hague International Model UN middle school students. my university students would work with high schoolers. They would join student youth competitions, and we developed an an interactive art installation that toured the community and went to different events and had a huge impact. Again, because teaching women's peace and security in the classroom is very safe, but you need women, peace, and security to have an impact in the community. So this was an art installation that we based off of our research that highlighted various women in the community who were women, peace, and security, who were advancing women, peace, and security. And we invited community members at all of these different events to leave their voice, to read about the women, and to read more quotes about it. And I just wanted to show you these slides to show you how many people it reached. And this is just the final slide of how many people left their voice and left the mark on us. So I went over my time. I apologize, but I just wanted to encourage you to teach women peace and security, to think about it, to teach. It's a fun clinical way to get your students out, to empower your women students, and to get them to be public speakers and to advance peace and stability. So thank you very much. I'll take questions.
So thank you for that. I'm always going over on time, so I apologize.
No, Melissa, we have sufficient time in hand. That was a great presentation. Thank you for that. And yes, we're open to questions, if any.
And so I wanted to talk just a little bit more about this. So I want everyone to see that there is a link, a direct link, and this is actually part of what I'm working on now, is trying to convince the lawyers and the law schools and the law students to see that they factor into larger problems in international relations. So often what we do as lawyers and as law professors and the law students, they kind of think in social justice. Everyone kinds of think in, helping this is a social justice issue, but they don't necessarily see how that social justice issue is actually it's part of a bigger picture of international relations and global problems and how it factors into international and national security. So I'm trying to get everyone to see that actually our lawyers judging all of this, we're actually we're not just in a silo here, we actually have a bigger effect on international relations and the security of our countries. And that's why I'm trying to get women, peace, security. It's also a good way to get women to practice law. Lots of times they don't really see that at least out here, people haven't necessarily been feeling like it's necessary or somebody else will do it. And I want them to see that literally peace and stability and global prosperity does depend on women's participation and leadership in these non-traditional fields, especially non-traditional fields that have to do with justice, laws, international diplomacy, and all of that. So it is critical, and it must be supported by men and women, and we do need to do a better job to see how we factor in to bigger pictures. And then also, since I don't know if anyone has questions, just stop me from talking if anyone has questions. But I also wanted to show you that that teaching in a vacuum, or not in a vacuum, but teaching in the classroom it's not going to do anything if I teach these women to be empowered and they understand the necessity to be empowered. But then in real life, outside of our classroom of 20-something people, they don't feel like they can speak out loud. They think it's inappropriate for them to speak in a public place or laugh in public or things like this. So I cannot just teach women, peace, and security in this safe little classroom of 20 students. I need to find ways to get these women out of the classroom and into the community where they can practice in a safe way. And that's why I found that linking with certain organizations, if you have them in your country, like THIMUN, the Hague International Model UN, or basically any organization that has public speaking for students and university students, getting starting your own street law experiences for students, but it's particularly focusing on your female students if you're coming from a community where the women are less empowered and it is not socially appropriate for them to necessarily speak out loud at dinner or even contradict male relatives or anything like that. If they're not sure that it's appropriate for them to have a strong opinion and say it out loud, giving them access and making it a class thing, a school thing is a great way. And I have.
Sorry to interrupt you. I thought you were done. Please continue.
Nope. Well, you know
Okay.
what? So interrupt me.
We have questions here. The first question comes from Sarah. She asks, she first of all thanks you and congrats you for your work on this issue. She says, I have a provocative question. I believe the women peace security agenda has value in itself, but is it not risky to substitute it to feminism just to make men more comfortable? That is what Sarah asks.
To be honest, I don't know if it's just making men more comfortable. I feel like there are some cultures and communities that when you start to talk about women's rights, be it based on some interpretation of religion or some verse or something, there's an automatic shutdown, and you need to find a way to reach those people. I have found that where I live, if I start to talk about feminism, most of the people in the room shut down. They don't want to listen to me. And if they don't want to listen to me, then I have to find a way to bridge it. I know, yes, for many, I've actually had some papers rejected from feminist journals because I have not been feminist enough for them. And so, yes, I do appreciate that there are going to be communities that also think I'm not doing enough to advance feminist principles. But for me, it's more important. To just find a way in to get people to listen to me and get people to hear that that the women I am working with and the women I'm educating have a place in leadership. And for me out here, I've found that the Women Peace Security Agenda is the tool. But you're right, in other cultures it doesn't need to be women, peace, and security. We can go to feminism.
Thank you. The next comment is by Pauline Collins. She says, why is it still so hard to get this accepted when it is well documented that women are the most affected by conflict and women at the table improve opportunity for peace, and on company boards, the companies do better financially?
I know. I mean, with you, Pauline, I don't know. I honestly have no idea, except I know, I agree with you, I don't get it. NATO yesterday held a conference on conflict, CRSV, conflict-related sexual violence, and they were talking about, and Nadia Murad was on it, and she's speaking, and I'm thinking about, there was this famous Armenian survivor who had, she was a sex slave in the 1918, 1915, something like that, and she was at the peace, at the peace talks after World War I, and I mean, I'm sitting there watching Nadia Murad thinking this is the same thing 100 years later, and we still are having to argue that CRSV is a war crime. I don't know, except I hear ya. But I would just say that basically we all need to do what we can, because I don't know why it's still an issue when for 100 years at least this has been being documented, so much has been said, so much research exists. I don't know why we have to keep arguing this. But I'll tell you actually that where I work, maybe I shouldn't be saying this, but how I started to get very passionate in this is I was in a faculty meeting about 7-8 years ago. And we were going for this accreditation, and they had all these fancy consultants come in from America, and they were talking about where we would fail and where we would pass on our accreditation. And my whole college is in there. And they're telling us about where we fail. And one of the reasons is they said that we would fail because of a diversity of faculty in our faculty of law. And there was a brief pause, and the room erupted in laughter. And we talk in Arabic and in English, so I'm listening to my colleagues on the headphones, and they're talking about, I hear comments saying women can't teach. I'm hearing that if we hire women faculty, they're just going to get pregnant and then they're going to leave. And I was hearing comments from the female students prefer to have male faculty teach them. And I don't even know what my emotion was. I was angry, I was upset, I was frustrated, I was embarrassed, and I was looking down because I was just like focusing on the translation in the headphones. And I realized that I was all red and I was gonna freak out. And I looked up. When I looked up, I realized I was the only female faculty member in the room, on the faculty. At that moment, I was the only female faculty member. And I realized that if I don't say this, if I don't start to push this, because I hadn't been pushing any of this, I had been happily working and I'd been focusing on externship, and I really hadn't been pushing I hadn't been pushing the women part. And I realized though that if this can happen while I'm in the room, because I'm the only woman in the room, we need to do something here. I need more women working with me. I need more TAs. I need everybody I can. And it is a conversation that needs to happen. And so that was my moment where I realized, oh my goodness, this isn't something that just happens to others. This is happening to me here where I work. So I just say, get involved and find whatever in you can. Yeah.
Yeah, I get that totally. Like coming from India, there's so many things that happen even around us. As students, I'm not a teacher, so I can only share things as a student. But yes, I totally get what you're talking about. Since we have time, I'd like to share one of these things, which, if it's okay, uh, there's these really small things like we live in residential universities, right? So we have curfew times to get into the hostels. Now, for the girls, they have made this rule that the girls have to get into the hostels by 10 p.m. Whereas boys, there's no such rule. So we have to get into these we have even if you have to prepare for these moot court competitions or other competitions where the teams are obviously they cannot be a team of only girls. You prepare the team according to who you think would work better. So they're like, no, you don't need to work with the boys after 10 because it's not safe for you. And we just argue that this is a residential university. There are guards outside. How can you say it's not safe? It's like, no, you're girls. And this is my principal telling to me that even if you were my daughter, I would have never permitted you. And I was looking at him and I was like, thank God your daughter's not here studying because what else to say? But then, yeah, I totally get what you're talking about. So, if since we have more time, if we have, yeah, I'm sorry, I interrupted you again, Melissa. If you're
No,
about
you
to say
didn't. No, no,
something.
no, no, no. No, no, no. Our students have this thing. Our students who come from outside Qatar live in dormitories, and those dormitories also have curfews, strict curfews, and even rules about how you're even allowed out. You need a letter, and basically your dad needs to come and pick you up,
Yes.
or a family member.
Um, do we have Monica here with us right now, Professor Monica? Since we had time, there was a question that came for Professor Monica. So, if you're here, we can engage in that question also. I don't think she's here now. So, okay, we still have like 2 minutes left. If there's anything anyone wants to say, or we can just close on to the session.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah, please.
I'm going to just shamelessly plug the UNODC E4J. So I do want to let you know about this free resource that is the Education for Justice Initiative. It is, if you Google UNODC and then Education for Justice, you can find it. It's all free, and there are a lot of gender modules on there. And you can find ways to relate it into not just ethics and integrity, but into crime, into anti-corruption, into a lot of different, well, it's UNODC, so it's going to be about crime. But there's a lot of material on there that is worth looking at. It's a great resource, and you can find ways to incorporate gender.
Thank you, Professor. So I think we can conclude this session now. It's been a great learning experience for me. I can say that, and I believe that everyone has had a great time. Next, we have the big debate coming up, which would be from 1:30. So we have a break till 1:30, and I'd request all of you to join us for the big debate. Uh, I can't wait to see what goes on there. So thank you, and thank you so much for having us here. Thank you.